Hi, good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. My name is Kristof. I'm a journalist from Belgium, Brussels-based. I've been working for the last 13 years with a Belgian magazine on international affairs. The name is Mo magazine. Our website is mo.be. You'll find articles in English as well. I've joined the ICIJ, the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, 2 years ago. And meanwhile, I worked on 3 investigative projects, and the one I will be talking today about is Luxembourg Leaks. When we published this in November 2014, we wrote about 20 articles relating to Belgian companies involved in the leaks. Was ICIJ the first one to report about it? No. In 2012, Panorama of the BBC and then a French program called Cash Investigation, they were the first ones to write about the fact that companies worldwide made secret deals in Luxembourg. The only thing is, after these 2 programs came out, not so much happened in terms of, it was not really questioned. The system as such just kept going. Luxembourg thought, what the hell, we continue with what we are doing. Why am I stressing this? Because this is one of the things I'm trying to teach. If you work together worldwide or even internationally, it doesn't have to be on a global scale, but can be on a regional scale, you can have much more impact than even a BBC panorama. Because in November 5, 2014, when we published Luxembourg Leaks in all of those different countries, it was front page news. It was shocking. I remember in Belgium at that day there was a huge strike. People were striking against austerity measures of the government. Actually, we journalists, we thought, damn, our story is coming out exactly on the day of the strike. What if nobody will pick up the story and they will only be reporting about the strike? But what happened is that the people who were in the streets, 100,000 angry Belgians, they picked up the story and they said, what? We are, our pension is cut, childcare is cut, and at the same time, the richest Belgian families and richest companies are hardly paying any taxes because of secret deals in Luxembourg. So it was really a big story that day. In a few words, what was the story? Well, Pepsi, IKEA, Deutsche Bank, and more than 340 other international companies, you can say multinationals, made secret tax deals. So what they did, they went to the Luxembourg tax authorities, they spoke about the idea that they had, they put it on paper, it was approved with a stamp, and as from that moment, instead of paying the normal rate of 29% taxes on the profits that these companies made in Luxembourg, they actually hardly paid any taxes, 1%, 0.5%. This was in 2 words the story. Here you see a picture of the tax office in Luxembourg City. There are several bureaus. If you manage to have a good relation with Bureau d'Impôt d'Entreprise C, so bureau number 6, this bureau, if they put a stamp on your documents, you could make millions and millions of euros. You could save them by paying hardly any taxes. Now, most of the companies, of course, do not have the contacts in Luxembourg to go to the tax office. So what they did is they worked with a kind of intermediate, Price Waterhouse Coopers, a big auditing firm, one of the big 4, and they helped the multinationals, the international companies, to get these tax rulings. And as I already explained, the result of all these tax rulings is that the international companies managed, to cut down their tax contributions with a huge amount. We are talking about, in the end, billions of euros if you count everything together. And the most interesting thing is, it was all legal. It is legal. This was not illegal behavior, at least that's the general analysis. How do they do it then? Well, the whole thing was the companies managed to exploit kind of not loopholes, but rather mismatches between different national tax systems. This was one way to get their taxes down. Another way was by making use of interesting Luxembourg legislation. For instance, in terms of property rights. If you had a beer on the African market and you managed to put the brand name, you would put it in a Luxembourg company, you could send all your profits to that Luxembourg company, and there the use of the brand name would hardly be taxed. So like this, you could, by making use of the different tax systems, you can make sure that you hardly paid any taxes on all the income that your brand made. And if then you went to look in Luxembourg, are there really companies present? If IKEA and Pepsi and Disney, etc., if they said, we're gonna set up a company in Luxembourg, was it really a company? Like, as you expect a company, a house with people working on it, with activities taking place? Well, this was very often the reality, as you see it here. Letterboxes, 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 tens, hundreds, thousands of letterboxes. No real economic activity. Once again, it's legal in Luxembourg. In Luxembourg, you do not need to have people on your payroll working for your company. It's okay if you have freelancers that you use. It's okay if you have your board meetings 4 times per year in Luxembourg. And apart from that, if you have an address with a letterbox, it seems to be sufficient. Result of this is that actually, because of this system, countries worldwide were losing income, tax income, millions and billions of euros and dollars tax income. Belgium, Bulgaria, US, all over the world, money was lost because of this deals, secret tax deals in Luxembourg. So basically, this is what Luxembourg, in a way, was saying to the world, but the world was fine with it. Now, November 5, we exposed the first leak. Then, a month later, there was a second leak. This was interesting. Why? Because the first leak was based on documents that came from PricewaterhouseCoopers, one of the auditing firms that helped companies preparing these secret tax deals. But the second leak showed that not only PricewaterhouseCoopers, but also the other Big Four, I think about Deloitte, Ernst & Young, etc., were helping companies to prepare these tax deals. Also, the time frame was broader. It was not only the period 2008-2010, but 2003, 2010. So basically, here with this second leak, we could show this is not exceptional. This is really a system that has been out there for many years and not only related to PricewaterhouseCoopers. That's in 2 words what the story was about. Of course, in all the countries of the world, the stories were more investigated into detail. We looked, what do the Belgian companies, who are they? How many taxes can they save through Luxembourg? Does the Belgian taxpayers department know about it? What do the Belgian politicians think about this? So the stories were much more detailed than I just presented it now, but this was the bottom line, okay? Saving taxes by secret Luxembourg deals. Now, how do we do it? Everything started with a leak of 28,000 pages. This was a leak, imagine 28,000 pages. I think if you start from the floor, it would be 3 meters up, so a lot of documents. 548 secret rulings between the Luxembourg tax authorities and between the companies itself. This is how the first page of the documents look like. And there on the right top you see a stamp with a date, November 11, 2009. Then you have the name of the tax office in Luxembourg. On the top you have the name of PricewaterhouseCoopers. And this was like the first page, which was a kind of summary of the secret tax ruling. And you had the kind of topics involved, PricewaterhouseCoopers, which Bulgarian companies were involved in this case. So it was the first page. Then the rest of the ruling, it would be PDF documents of 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 pages, quite complicated technical language. Where do the documents come from? It's a good question. The policy of ICIJ is not to comment on our sources, so that's the only thing I can say about it. Now, that being said, in Luxembourg, a person has been indicted, a former employee of PricewaterhouseCoopers. He's a French person. His name is Antoine Deltour. So he is the one who is in Luxembourg going to be on trial for being the alleged whistleblower of LuxLeaks. Now, back to the question, how do we do it? So, ICIJ got this huge bunch of documents, 28,000 documents, 28,000 pages of documents, and had to somehow distribute it to its network of journalists, more than 150 worldwide. So you have to find a way, and this is where data analysis came in. The first step they did, the data team of ICIJ, the first thing they did was set up a database. All the information from the front page of the documents that I just showed you was put into a kind of Excel file. This was step number one. Okay, so take the data from the PDF and put it in a database. Then, step number two, make this database searchable. So make it public for your members, for the ICIJ reporters, so that they can start searching in it. Me, as a Belgian journalist, I only was interested in the first stage in the Belgian companies. So I didn't need to see all the 28,000 pages. I only needed the ones that were important for Belgium. So because of this search tool that was set up, the name is Blacklight, we could search all of these fields. So that made it more practical, more easy to deal with these 28,000 pages. I told you, journalists, over 80 journalists worked on this project. ICIJ has more members, but over 80 journalists worked on this project in 26 countries. Now, here the challenge is, how do you communicate? Are you going to do everything with Skype, or are you going to call each other? Are you going to meet up? What ICIJ did, in this case, it set up a secure communication platform. You can compare it to kind of Facebook for investigative journalists, something like that. It was what you see. It was like this. On the top you see main, forum, groups, files. So it was a discussion forum, but also information documents were exchanged, PDFs, articles, interviews, sound bites, etc., pictures. We were asked to go there every day in order to see what is the discussion, how do other colleagues deal with the documents, which new information, insights have they come up with. So this is how IT definitely helped this investigation. But it's not enough. You also need to meet each other in person. This is very important to establish a kind of human connection and a kind of a trust relationship. It works so much better if you meet in person. So this meeting took place in June 2014, 5 months before the actual publication. It was in Brussels. We gathered with around 30, 35 journalists, and the project was first presented. Here we have a guy from the UK, Richard Brooks. He was a former tax inspector. He helped us with understanding the documents, with explaining the most important points, the vague lines of the investigation. And he also explained the challenges, because what was the challenge? Okay, go and explain this to your readers. That was the challenge. Make a nice story of it. Don't come up with a boring text story that nobody cares about. You have to translate this complicated technical leak into stories that people want to read, that they understand this is about my life. This is about me paying a lot of taxes because the rich people manage hardly to pay any taxes. So this was the challenge for us journalists. Now, everything I told you before, up to now, so far didn't really have to do with actual journalistic research. It's all preparation. The leak, making it searchable, setting up a platform. Now the real journalism starts, let's say. What was this? First, we had to analyze the rulings. Imagine you have, so the ruling, the secret tax agreement. Imagine you have one agreement between a Bulgarian company and the Luxembourg tax authorities. You have these 30 pages of complicated language. You have to understand it. That was step number one. 2, dig open sources. Look for more information about the companies involved. For instance, by exploring company registries. I will come back to all of this more in detail. We analyzed the tax laws. We did interviews with the company. We knocked their doors in Luxembourg, and we scraped the Luxembourg Gazette. Now, as I told you, first analyze the rulings. I'm going to give you 1 minute to read this English text. This is an excerpt, a few words from those rulings. Just take your time and read. Okay, I think you get the point. Who can explain me what's this in simple words? Who can summarize? You see, this was the whole point. 28,000 pages of this language. I felt stupid. I felt so small when I read this the first time. I showed you the picture of this meeting in Brussels where 35 colleagues were sitting and we were asking, okay, who understands it? And a few fingers went up of colleagues. I was like, oh my God, I have to work together with those smart guys who understand this. I feel so stupid. So step number 1 is understand this rocket science. Go and speak to people who do understand this, who can explain in simple words what's written here. So we had to look for tax experts. Each country has some tax experts, professors at university, people who make deals in Luxembourg, because this was a kind of a challenge to find people who do have some independence, because usually people who understand these documents, they understand the documents because they work with it, because they go to Luxembourg themselves to make these kind of secret deals. So it was a challenge. Step number 1, analyze the documents and ask help from experts. Then, step number 2, dig the open sources. As you all know, there is a lot of information available in open sources. Think about press databases. So imagine a Bulgarian company that made a secret tax deal in Luxembourg, and you want to know everything about that company. How do you do it? Well, press database, you go to the website of the company, website of other companies who write about it. Social media were very useful. LinkedIn, to give you one example, sometimes we saw that Luxembourg daughter companies, subsidiaries, were set up. And then if you look at who are the directors of those Luxembourg companies, who is in the management, you would see the names of people. And if then you looked at LinkedIn, you would find their CVs, and very often they used to work for PricewaterhouseCoopers in the past. So you would see the small little world of Luxembourg tax industry, people first working for PricewaterhouseCoopers, then they go to the revolving doors, then they go and work as a director for these kind of letterbox companies. It's a small world, and all this information was public because people put their CVs on LinkedIn. It's amazing how much private data people share on LinkedIn. That's great for us journalists. Annual reports of companies do provide quite a lot of detailed information. Then Graydon is a company that you have to pay, well, it's a company you have to pay in order to get information about other companies. But it's our experience that if you go to the Graydon office in your country and you say, look, I'm working on a great investigation, we would ask your help. We would like to ask your help. We don't have a budget, but Graydon will be mentioned, as a source. Often they will do it. So I can imagine if your media company does not have a budget to pay a subscription to a database like Graydon, just go and talk to them. You might get a good deal, for free in return for mentioning their name one time as a source, which is fair enough. And then, of course, the financial statements of the countries. By checking those online, we could see how many taxes companies actually paid in Belgium, in Luxembourg, etc. Another example of open source is of course, Google Maps. At some point, we ended up with a story of a Belgian company with subsidiaries in Luxembourg, with links to Gibraltar, the British Virgin Islands, the Cayman Islands, Hong Kong. Is a very complicated international structure. If you want to show this story to your readers, and then go and look for those images. Show, look, this is where in this address, where the mother company actually is registered. It immediately tells so much about how these international structures are being set up in all kind of tax havens. Here, I will show you an example of information we found in financial statements of companies. There was a Luxembourg company called Vediholt. In Luxembourg, they made 150 million euro profit, and on that amount, they only paid 3,000 euro taxes. When you find these figures, it's great. You don't have to do much to convince your readers. Everybody understands that there is something wrong with this system. 150 million euro profit on which you pay a bit more than 3,000 euro in taxes. Another story was about a Belgian company, Dolomy, the Marche les Dames, part of a Belgian group that had subsidiaries in Luxembourg that made a secret tax deal in Luxembourg. What do we read in the financial statements? 378 million euro profit, again, less than 3,000 euro taxes paid on it. So imagine, we bring this story at the same moment that 100,000 Belgians are marching the streets saying, this is not fair, government, you should also, you should let everybody pay a fair amount of taxes, and then journalists publish these kind of numbers. You can imagine people were really angry, really pissed off, and they really wanted changes in the system. Another thing we did was explore company registries. Think about countries like Luxembourg, Curaçao, Hong Kong, etc. In every country there's a point where companies have to register themselves. The day they are set up, who is in the board of directors, what are the statutes, what was the goal, why was the company set up, etc. This is often not for free, but it's also not expensive. You can go to a website called lийкс, and there you can just type the name of the company you want information for. You can click on what kind of information do you want, the board of directors, the statutes, etc. And then you pay, for instance, €5, and you get a copy of those documents in your mailbox 10 minutes later. This was also very useful to see the structure of the companies, the way they were interrelating. Another thing we did, we analyzed the tax law. So we started reading this boring legislation in Luxembourg. Why? In the end, it proved to be very, very useful because one of the laws, the one that I told you about, the one on royalties, remember this beer that was sold in Africa, and because of the construction setup, all the profits that went to Luxembourg were hardly taxed, at least they were exempted from tax for 80%. This was thanks to a Luxembourg law, and by reading this legislation, we saw that it was signed, the law was signed by Juncker himself, Jean-Claude Juncker, the president of the European Commission. Back in the days when he was the Prime Minister of Luxembourg, he was also Minister of Finance, and in that capacity, he was the one signing those laws. So this immediately showed the personal responsibility of Jean-Claude Juncker. He survived Luxembourg leaks. Good for him, but he was directly involved. This system of secret tax deals in Luxembourg was set up under Juncker as being the political number one. Of course, what you should do as a journalist when you write a story is go and talk to anybody involved. So we went to interview the companies. Many of them refused to answer our questions. A few did answer that they were active in Luxembourg, but that what they did was nothing illegal. So they said, yes, it's true, we have these deals, but it's legal. And then exceptionally, a company did answer, like this one. It was an interim office in Belgium. They did provide us with 3 pages of detailed answers, but that was really the exception. In general, worldwide, the experience was that they hardly would speak to us. Then knock their door in Luxembourg. I think everybody in his life has tried Belgian beer, Stella Artois, Blonde Leffe, etc. Now you have to know that the company that's producing this beer is actually the world's biggest beer group. It's called AB InBev. They are owned by a couple of very, very, very rich families, shareholder families. Now we discovered that these families have a Luxembourg company set up, to deal with all the practical and financial arrangements. So the shareholders behind the world's biggest beer group have a company in Luxembourg, and it's situated here, in this there. That's the company. This is where billions and billions of euros and dollars pass through. Now, interestingly, when you go and knock the door, here I have to ask for a moment not to take pictures, please, because the picture on the left was taken inside the building, and we're not 100% sure yet if it's legal to publish it, but I'm just showing you. What we saw is that the shareholder, the shareholder company in Luxembourg set up was just one of the companies together with 200 on one letterbox. There were 10 letterboxes in that entrance hall. On one letterbox there were 200 companies, one of them being the one I've been talking about. So this immediately shows you the picture. There was no substance, no economical substance there. Then I rang the bell, somebody opened the door, and I went up to his office, and he explained, well, yes, we indeed are the representatives of this shareholders, but I cannot give you any more comments. My boss is not here at the moment. I can also not tell you how many other companies we work for, etc. So then it was suddenly very vague, but knocking the door, the old school journalism, it really brought important elements to the story. Then, another thing that the data unit of ICIJ did, and which I think was a good idea, they scraped the Luxembourg Gazette. The Gazette, the official publication of Luxembourg, of the state, in which all the companies that are set up are one time published, they are addressed. So by scraping this, ICIJ, for instance, found out that there is one address in Luxembourg. The street is Guillaume Kroll Street, number 5. When you go there, you will see this building. There are 1,600 companies registered there. They have their official address there. So imagine here are 1,600 companies. Probably, or maybe, this is the richest address in the world. I think it would be an interesting exercise to see how many billions of euros are flowing through this one address. But you can only find out this, you can only come up with this number by data analysis. If nobody would have scraped the Luxembourg Gazette, we would never know that there are 1,600 companies there. I think this was a great story done by the data colleagues. So I told you what is the story and how he did it. Now, did it change anything? I told you in 2012 when BBC and Cash Investigation, the French program, when they published more or less the same content, not very much happened. Okay, the European Commission, they did start an investigation to see whether a few companies, Amazon for instance, whether they were receiving state aid, because according to the European legislation, this would be unfair competition. If one country is helping one company, then it's a kind of state aid. So this investigation was going on before LuxLeaks was published. But what else did we achieve? What was the impact? Well, first of all, the stories were spread all over the world. It was between November and May, so in half a year time, 4.3 million clicks on the articles of LuxLeaks, on the website of ICIJ and its partner media. So I think this is the first impact, that the stories were out there, they were shared worldwide. Then ICIJ also decided to publish the leak, the 28,000 pages, online. Sorry for Bulgaria, there seems to be not so much information that is really big for Bulgaria. In Belgium, I was lucky. Belgian companies made 37 secret deals. I think if you look for Bulgaria in the online database of ICIJ, you only come up with two companies, and then they're not even really Bulgarian companies, I would say. So there are some links about investment in properties in Bulgaria, but it's not, sorry guys, it's not really a big story for you. It doesn't mean that there are no Bulgarian companies who make secret tax deals in Luxembourg. It just means that in the leak that ICIJ received, there were not many. Impact. As I said, Jean-Claude Juncker, he had a bit a hard week. It was the first week of his presidency when Luxembourg Leaks was published. But he survived. Politically, he survived. He's still out there. The European Commission, as I said, they had already launched a state aid inquiry into not only Luxembourg, but also Ireland, Netherlands, later also into Belgium. But they did put a few new points on the political agenda. One was an agreement to exchange these secret rulings between the member states. In other words, now in the future, Luxembourg will tell the Belgian tax department, hey, we have 5 Belgian companies who made a deal with us. Here's the information. We think it's a good step, but it's not enough. I think the ruling should not only be exchanged between countries, I think they should be made public so that every taxpayer, every citizen of the EU can see who is making secret deals. There is another proposal put on the agenda by the European Commission. It was on country-by-country reporting. Is the idea that a company is open and transparent about in which countries it's active, how much taxes is it paying there, and to report all of this. This is not approved yet. Another idea that has been put on the table is the idea of having a common consolidated tax base. The idea of having one minimum tax rate for any company who's doing business in Europe. Even if you make a secret tax deal in Luxembourg, which brings your taxes down to 1%, no, thanks to this EU legislation, everybody would pay the same. But this is just an idea on the table now. There is no agreement about it. That is for the Commission. Then the European Parliament, they also took some action. They tried to set up a real inquiry committee. Unfortunately, there was not enough political support for that, but at least a so-called special committee was set up, the Taxe Committee. During 6 to 9 months, they will be organizing hearings in the European Parliament, so meaning they will invite experts, companies to go and testify. The only thing is they have a little bit less power than a Fulbright inquiry, because they can invite companies, but if IKEA and Amazon and Pepsi, etc., just have already a very full agenda for that week and unfortunately can't make it, it's the end of the story. They cannot oblige companies to go and speak there. The nice thing for us, ICIJ journalists, is that we were also invited to go and speak to the European Parliament and tell about the results of our investigation. So at least you know that the politicians are listening to what you came up with. Then I think there is also indirect impact. You have to know that on the international level, when taxes are being discussed, usually it's the OECD who is playing the pivotal role, the main role. And they have been discussing already for a couple of years in the so-called base erosion and profit shifting project about how to make taxes internationally more fair, how to come to a new international tax standards. And this discussion, without any doubt, is much easier now for the diplomats and other people around the table than before Luxembourg leaks. There is a kind of window of opportunity, a kind of momentum. For instance, the tax chief of OECD, he said that corporate tax avoidance while taxpayers suffer is simply not acceptable. So there really is, there is a kind of window of opportunity created through these series of articles. Now, also in all the individual countries, things happened. Sometimes nothing, sometimes a lot. In the United States, this was most surprising to us, silence, at least from the political world. Obama didn't speak about LuxLeaks, the parliament didn't really mention it. So even though the majority of the companies in the whole project were American companies, silence. Now other countries in the EU, for instance, were more active. In Germany, there was a kind of investigation group set up by the finance minister. They published a report about the findings of LuxLeaks. So far, the conclusion is that they couldn't calculate how much the financial damage was done to Germany. Finland, the Netherlands, and Belgium had a hearing in the parliament. For instance, these are the 3 Belgian ICIJ members, we were heard in a hearing in the parliament. The UK, they did summon Shire and PricewaterhouseCoopers to go and testify before Parliament. Parliament published a heavy critical report. On the other hand, LuxLeaks was not seen as a national problem in the UK, but more as something Europe had to deal with. Also in Sweden, in Denmark, and other countries, things really happened. I think, for instance, in Denmark, some local regions will no longer do business with companies that use tax havens, that make tax deals in, for instance, Luxembourg. So, I've been telling you about the story itself, how we made it, what was the impact. Now, one last word about legal issues, because you know, as a journalist, you start fighting with some of the most powerful in your country and in the world. Is it dangerous? What's the legal impact? How can you make sure to end up in court? Well, first the good news. ICIJ has not faced any lawsuits following LuxLeaks. Some companies have criticized our work, saying, no, it's not true, boo, you write mistakes. But then when we ask, come on, show the mistakes in the articles, there was no more reaction. Also, we are not aware of any legal claims against all the ICIJ partner media in those 26 countries. There have been threats of lawsuits, but nobody for having published the articles and the content is brought to court. One more thing about that, I will come back to that later. Now, a few days before we published, there was a letter we received. A law firm on behalf of PricewaterhouseCoopers Luxembourg wrote a letter saying that any use or disclosure of the documents could subject us to criminal and civil liability. We also couldn't quote from the letter in our documents. But then, in April, so 5 months after the publications, unfortunately, something did happen in the legal field. Edouard Perrin, it's our French colleague from ICIJ, who basically was the one who, in 2012, already published as the first one about these Luxembourg rulings in his program Cash Investigations, the one I started my story with. He, meanwhile, is indicted in Luxembourg. So according to the Luxembourg prosecutor's office, Edouard is, well, he would have helped an alleged whistleblower with bringing out the documents. We, of course, think this is extremely unfortunate. We think it's a huge blow to press freedom in Europe to bring out a story in which you show that 340 multinational companies, through secret tax deals in Luxembourg, managed to cut billions of taxes, and then who is going to the court? It's one of the journalists who played a role in bringing out the story. I think it's a world upside down, so it's a very unfortunate thing. We addressed this, of course, in the European Parliament when we could talk during the hearing, and we hope, of course, that there will be more pressure, that this trial will never have to take place, because it's stupid. It's the world upside down. One more thing that I would like to point at is that only 2 weeks ago, in the same European Parliament, there was a new European directive discussed. It was already discussed by the Commission. It was already discussed by the European Council. Now it was on the agenda of a committee, the legal committee, you can say, of the European Parliament. And later on, it's going to be discussed in the plenum, in the plenary meeting of the European Parliament. This is a directive on business secrets. The idea is to protect business secrets, to make sure that when a company develops some production plan, for instance, production process, when a company has other business secrets like where do I buy my goods, who are my best customers, etc., a company should be able to protect this. So there's a new legislation put on paper, but we journalists think that the way that the commas and the dots in those new laws are being put, it could be very harmful to investigative journalism. So this is something I would like to ask your attention for. Have a look at it, discuss it with your Bulgarian members of European Parliament. There is serious concern about this draft directive on business secrets. One happy thing to end with, LuxLeaks was honored with the Investigation of the Year Awards recently at the Global Editors Network Data Journalism Awards. So we're happy that not only the political world and the public sees the merits, but also colleague journalists saw that this was a great work. I was very happy. For me, it was my first ICIJ investigation that I could collaborate on. Yeah, it's fantastic to join such a group and to actually come up with good results. Thank you very much for listening. There's like 5 or 10 minutes for questions if you would have. here's my Twitter, here's my email address. Do not be afraid to contact me later. And thank you very much for listening.
Имате ли въпроси към Кристоф? Някой? Can you please use this one?
I'm just wondering, wasn't there any leaks during your investigation going to the company so they could cover their traces?
Yeah. Well, during such a 5-6 months investigation in 26 countries, it's very important that you make good agreements among each other. So we all agreed that we would wait as long as possible with contacting the companies. It was really postponed until, let's say, 1 month before publication. Well, in the United States, there is a law about taking enough time in advance in order to contact companies, so you also have to take those things into account. But no, as far as we know, the companies or PricewaterhouseCoopers had not been notified of our investigation, as far as we know. So that is one thing. Another thing is it's also not so easy to hide traces. Some traces you just do leave behind. And once that I showed that in the open sources. So that went pretty fine, actually. Yeah. But it was a matter of concern, definitely. Like not to choose exactly the good moment to start contacting the companies for their reactions. You have to do it, but you also don't want to spill the beans in advance. So that was a difficult balance we had to find. There was a question over there. Maybe the microphone. Can you give the mic?
It was a moment that you feel not in safety.
No. I have to say, when we published, we were 200% sure of the stories we published. Everything was backed by sources and more sources. Also, with my magazine, what I did do, so I published around 20 articles. Every single letter was reviewed by our judicial assistants of the media company, just to make sure that we will be strong if ever a company would try to sue us, that nothing could happen. So that is one thing. Two, I must say that some companies who on the record did not want to say anything, actually off the record, I mean, they are just human beings like you and me. Off the record, they sometimes said, like, yeah, well, we understand your concern and your ethical questions about this system. It is there, we use it. So I have to say it was not so hostile that I was fearing for my life. But that being said, once again, you know that you are attacking big powers, very rich people who have the resources. I was aware that they could, for instance, rent a private investigator to go behind the journalist. That yes, you are aware of that, so you don't put the pictures of your children on Facebook and those kind of general measurements of precaution. That I did take. And just because of the fact that you go against powerful powers that be. But no, as far as I know, nobody was threatened in this investigation or was put on under pressure in terms of violence, etc. Judicially, yes, that I explained. Yeah.
Други въпроси?
More or less the same thing you mentioned, that you said a secure platform.
Yeah.
It could be crucial. How secure was it? How you did it?
Let's say that now 1 year later, the platform is more secure than 1 year ago. It's crucial. I think, I know 2015, we all know, thanks to Edward Snowden, how easily it is for some government services to enter our private communications. I think it was secure, but it could be more secure. Today it is more secure. What I also learned from when I started working with ICIJ is sometimes you really have to be able to technically protect the information you are sharing. So I started learning to work with PGP, which is pretty good privacy. It's a way of encrypting your emails. Later this afternoon I saw there's a session about protecting data. This is something I really advise every person in the room to learn in the next year at some stage. It will take you 4 hours with somebody next to you who will explain it. Learn to encrypt your emails. You're gonna need, if you're serious about like journalism and exposing things in the future, you will. This is some of the tools you just need. You just need it, and you better learn it. And for instance, when you go to my Twitter account, there you can see my PGP number. Like this, sources who would like to share information with me, they know that they can do it in a safe way. So that's what I can say about online communication.
Did you inform the tax administration or the police, and did you take some support for them for this case?
Okay, so did the Belgian tax administration support the case? Well, first of all, it was for us an ethical question whether we should inform them before or after our publication. Because imagine we would... Yeah, before. No, we didn't. We have been discussing the question whether we should ask their help, because they have the expertise to analyze these kind of data. But we thought it would be a little bit tricky. Our role as journalists was to inform the public about the situation as it is. If at the same time you go and bring those data to government offices, we thought we would be overstepping our role as journalists. So we decided not to do it. It was one of the ideas that was on the table, but because of ethical reasons, we decided no, we will not inform the Belgian tax department before our publication. We will do it at the same moment as everybody. And then we also knew that ICIJ was going to publish the rulings online. So if they would ask for it, we could say, go to the website of ICIJ. There you can find all the documents and you can do your work with it. In Swiss leaks, another investigation by ICIJ, which, by the way, was done in Bulgaria last weekend, if I'm well informed, in the newspaper 24 Hours, by our colleague Alexeyna Dimitrova. She started publishing the first Swiss leaks stories. These are stories about people with a bank account in Switzerland, not necessarily declared to the Bulgarian tax administration. When we did the Swiss leaks investigation, ICIJ decided not to publish all this leaked information online, because it was a different kind of information. Here we were talking about 28,000 pages tax rulings, so deals between a government office and a company. In Swiss leaks, we were talking about very privacy sensitive information, personal information of people, addresses, bank accounts, how much money was on the bank accounts, so information of a different nature. There we decided not to publish, and also the communication to the Belgian government, to our Belgian tax department, was sorry, ICIJ or we, the partner media, we will not provide you with that database. If you want the data, go and ask them in France, because in the French government was in possession of more or less the same data. So that's about sharing or not with information with governments. Yeah, thank you.
Можем да вземем още един-два последни въпроса към Кристоф. Имате ли? Then I have one final question. Okay. On LuxLeaks, like 80 journalists from different newsrooms all over Europe and the world actually work together. How do you organize, and how is it to work with people that you don't know, you haven't met, when sometimes it's difficult to work even with the people in your newsroom?
As I said, meeting in person was an important step. It also seems to me that ICIJ in its recruitment is looking for profiles of you know, okay, we are all journalists. There are different kinds of journalists. In a way, journalists often have quite a big ego. It's good because it makes you like go behind stories, but you are not necessarily the best team player. So a good journalist does not necessarily mean a good team player. I have the impression that ICIJ is looking for profiles of team players, people who by nature rather cooperate than keep information to themselves. This helps the whole process. But it's a matter of trust. In a way, you have to trust your colleague from Switzerland that is chatting with you on this secure platform, and he says, look, I did an interview with a Swiss tax expert, and he said that this and this and this. In a way, you always have to double check the information, but you also have to trust, in a way, your colleagues. So this helps a lot. Meeting in person definitely is crucial. Only online, without seeing each other, ever having met each other, is not working. But what we also notice, Paul is here, he's also a member of ICIJ, long time before me. You start meeting people at conferences, like today, what we have here today on the national level in Bulgaria. This has been going on worldwide for about 10 years. Since the year 2000, more or less, there are these kind of conferences on investigative journalism, on data journalism, on innovative journalism, etc., narrative journalism. And you will see that there is a kind of universe of journalists who are interested in the same topics as you, who more or less have the same intellectual level, the same skills, the same eager to know things. And there's this kind of universe. So I can only recommend you to go to those conferences. There are annual conferences in Brussels about data journalism. There is one coming up in Norway, Lillehammer, in October. It's called the Global Investigative Journalism Conference. There you will meet the people, and it's by establishing these kind of personal networks that these big investigations actually work. If you see, first came the conferences, people started getting to know each other, setting up networks, local, regional, international, global networks, and now 10 years later you see the results, the trickle-down effect. You see different big investigations coming. I think this is a trend that has started and it will only increase, and it's something good. So it's great that Bulgaria is showing interest. I think this is really the future of journalism, so it's great to have you here, and I can only recommend you go to more of these kind of meetings, especially international.